Hi everyone, Tracy DW here. A recent visit to the British Museum to see the Benin Bronzes got me thinking about repatriation. Not the kind where economies compensate diasporas and indigenous populations, but the kind that returns historical artefacts back to their countries of origin. The Benin Bronzes are of special interest to me because my Year 6 pupils study the topic of the Benin Kingdom in the spring term. Earlier this year, a section closure ruined a planned school trip for these 11-year-olds, so I took it upon myself to pay the museum a visit, and I was relieved to know that the section had reopened in time for the start of the summer vacation. Not returning historical artefacts to their country of origin is a topic of debate in the fields of archaeology, heritage management, ethics and international law. Though some artefacts were legally obtained when international heritage laws did not exist, it can be argued that foreign institutions such as the British Museum provides these artefacts as part of global access to education and research, provides better preservation and protection to more funding, and promotes the idea that human history is shared globally and transcends international borders. In some cases, returning artefacts can be complex both logically and legally. However, artefacts taken under unethical circumstances raise questions about rightful ownership and causes a loss of identity, as they often hold deep spiritual, cultural and historical significance in their country of origin. Indigenous populations are deprived from experiencing their own heritage firsthand, and keeping artefacts abroad can be seen as a continuation of colonial exploitation. Founded by an Act of Parliament in 1753 and based on Sir Hans Sloane's private collection of 71,000 objects, the British Museum in London is one of the world's oldest public museums. It first opened to the public in 1759 in Montague House, Bloomsbury. It is now home to invaluable collections such as the Townley Collection from 1772, the Rosetta Stone from 1799, and the Elgin or Parthenon marbles from 1801. It also initiated from its collection the founding of the British Library in 1823 and 1973 and the Natural History Museum in 1881. So what is the British Museum's aim? Is it to promote artefacts as cultural ambassadors through which to share knowledge of nature, science, history and art for the public benefit? Or is it a symbol of Britain's power and global reach, as well as a repository for artefacts collected as the spoils of war from many cultures? In October 2021, the British Museum received a written request for the return of Nigerian antiquities from the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture in Nigeria. In the same month, at the Benin Dialogue Group meeting, representatives from the Benin Royal Palace also made a request for the return of the Benin collections, amid various public statements made in the past. This conversation and dialogue has been constant and consistent since August 2018, when the then director of the British Museum, Hartwig Fischer, met with His Majesty Oba Oware II during a visit to the Benin Royal Palace. Although His Majesty observed that the artefacts may serve as cultural ambassadors when being displayed internationally, he also requested that the Benin collection be returned. A visit to the British Museum in July 2020 from the then Minister for Information and Culture, La Mohammed, provided the necessary clarifications requested by the museum in a friendly and courteous meeting for the repatriation of antiquities. However, the Nigerian election in 2023 ushered in a new president and Minister for Information and Cultures, but the British Museum remains open to ongoing discussion about the issue. The British Museum also demonstrates its patronage through its partnerships. As well as the Benin Dialogue Group, there is the African Programme, the International Training Programme, the Archaeological Project, and finally, Digital Benin, a database of over 5,000 photos, objects, and archived material. At present, you can view Benin's historical artefacts in 136 institutions across 20 countries. However, what is most significant is that the British Museum is open to investigation and acknowledgement of the colonial historical significance, which provides the context of how this vast and impressive collection, this spoils of war, ended up within the hands of European institutions. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to make contact with Benin in the late 15th century. The African kingdom traded first in pepper, ivory and textiles, but by the 17th century, one of the main commodities had become enslaved Africans. Within this time span, England had made several key developments that strengthened its ability to colonise other countries. A strong navy enabled it to challenge and dominate trade routes against the Spanish and the Dutch. And chartered companies monopolised trade, such as the East Indies Company, founded in 1600, and the Virginia Company, founded in 1606. Both enabled them to establish trading posts and colonies spanning as far as India and Asia to the Americas and the Caribbean. Established in 1660, with a royal charter granted in 1672 under Charles II, the Royal African Company played a major role in England's involvement in the transatlantic slave trade and colonial expansion during the 17th century, and the Bank of England, founded in 1694, provided a reliable source of loans for mercantile activities, such as shipbuilding, instead of relying on wealthy individuals or foreign lenders. As individuals built up private collections of their spoils from trading exploits, it laid the foundation for the public collections at the British Museum. Benin played a role in the capture and selling of enslaved Africans, but why did they do this? Although the Oba would ban the sale of slaves at times, Benin engaged in trading slaves, but restricted it to war captives and people accused of witchcraft and other social offences. Early maps of slave routes along the west coast show the Kingdom of Dahomey nearby, with transatlantic routes going through the Bight of Benin from Benin ports such as Ouda. By the 18th century, Benin's primary source of trade had shifted away from slaves and back to other commodities such as textiles and palm oil. By the end of the 1800s, British rule dominated the Nigerian coast and trade shifted towards European control in the scramble for Africa of 1884. In February 1897, Benin City was captured by British forces in response to an attack on a British trade mission the previous month. A bloody and brutal occupation followed widespread fighting and the destruction of half of the city through burning and looting. The King Oba was sent into exile, several chiefs were executed, and the bronze, brass and ivory plaques were included as part of the spoils of war. Intricately crafted by highly skilled work in metal by the Edo people between the 13th and 16th centuries, these bronze reliefs act as a visual history book for the kingdom, revealing depictions of warriors, royalty and deities. Benin court life, rituals, social hierarchy, trade events and commemorated successful military campaigns, as well as other events in Benin communal life and culture. These spoils of war have most certainly become cultural ambassadors in helping historians understand Benin's political structure, international connections, spiritual life and religious practices before European colonisation disrupted them. And they challenge outdated colonial myths that African societies lacked sophistication or artistry before European contact, and the materials used also revealed trade links between Benin, Europe and other African states, highlighting the region's active participation in global commerce before colonial domination. In 1897, the British Museum successfully petitioned to receive 204 of the bronzes as a donation. Most of the bronzes were sold to other museums in the UK and Germany, with a few sold to the UK Foreign Office. The British Museum acquired more from private collectors such as Harry Beasley in 1944 and Sir Henry Wellcome in 1954. An interim period from 1897 to 1914 brought in a new King Oba, but despite administrative and political conflicts brought on by the British, much of Benin's customs and rituals have survived to this day. How has modern Nigeria managed to achieve this? The descendants of the Benin Kingdom in present-day Edo State, Nigeria, have preserved their identity and culture through a combination of traditional practices, leadership institutions, art, religion and modern-day cultural revival efforts. This is in respect for the Oba of Benin and in making the Benin Palace a centre for cultural heritage. The Edo language is still spoken widely among the people of Benin City and surrounding areas, helping maintain a distinct cultural identity despite colonial and post-colonial influences. The Igu Festival is also celebrated annually to honour ancestors, strengthen spirituality and reaffirm loyalty to the Oba. Bronze casting, ivory carving and beadwork, skills for which the ancient Benin Kingdom was famous, are still practised by modern artisans. These crafts not only honour historical traditions, but also keep alive the artistic legacy that made Benin renowned worldwide. And the Benin Royal Museum and upcoming Edo Museum of West African Art are being developed to display Benin bronzes and other artefacts, reinforcing cultural pride and heritage education. Ongoing campaigns for the repatriation of Benin bronzes highlight efforts to reclaim and preserve their stolen history. My visit to the British Museum made me realise how colonialism has eroded thousands of years of traditions and customs. Looting artefacts brings an abrupt end to and violates identities, ways of life and sophisticated hierarchical systems of society that are central to the civilization and survival of communities. While there is an argument for retaining artefacts for education and research, there has been growing calls for the repatriation of them, not just because of the loss of cultural identity and ethical concerns, but that citizens of the artefact's country of origin will be deprived of experiencing their own heritage firsthand for themselves, especially if they cannot afford to travel to foreign museums. This poses a stance that is both ironic and hypocritical. Perhaps the greatest show of turning these artefacts from being spoils of war into cultural ambassadors would be in returning artefacts as an act of reconciliation, acknowledging past wrongdoings and fostering improved international relations. After all, artefacts displayed in their own homeland can boost tourism and contribute to their own economy while strengthening national pride. If you liked this podcast, then stay on this listening platform, click the subscribe button and check out my other episodes related to this one, such as the Pink Map Project, The Ultimate Paradox from Season 1, War Crimes Part 2 from the second season, and Crown Benefits from the fourth. And don't forget what I call the heart and soul of the Stories to be Told movement, my stories or poetic narratives, Caribbean Wind, Caribbean Rush, Nights at the Round Table, the Berlin Conference 1884, and Gone with the Wind, Macmillan's Speech for Change. These are all available on the website in paperback, on Amazon in Kindle format, and in ebook format at Apple Books and all other digital platforms. And also the publication of the latest 4 titles. Now, if you want to find out more, just visit storiestobetold.com and check out the learning platforms for The Journey's End, Giving Back Hong Kong, Bite from the Big Apple, A Story for New York, Hope for Zimbabwe, Arise the Phoenix, and A Story for South Africa. If you'd like to sign up to my email list, just visit the website where you can opt in and receive your free samples of my first 4 titles. And finally, remember that you can also send me an audio message on the SpeakPipe link, which is also in the show notes, so don't be a stranger. Feel free to like, follow and share us on social media when you visit the website. Just click onto whichever social media link you would like to follow us on. And, as always, it is a pleasure and a privilege to share my learning journey with you in this podcast series, and I encourage you to either begin or continue your own. History is a matter of fact or perspective. I'm Tracy DW, and this is a Stories to be Told podcast. Stay safe, stay well, stay blessed. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next